Hey guys, tonight we're unraveling the mysterious language of symbols, the kind whispered into pyramids, carved into bones, and passed between generations like sacred lullabies. You know, just some light bedtime imagery. Imagine a warm desert breeze, stars scattered like diamonds across a deep indigo sky, and somewhere in the distance, a boat drifts silently down the Nile, its sail painted with a single staring eye. No, not creepy at all. Comforting even. The Eye of Horus is watching in a good way, maybe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So let's talk about this eye, not just any eye. The Eye of Horus, also known as the Wadjet, it wasn't drawn on tomb walls and necklaces just to look pretty. It was protection, cosmic insurance basically. According to myth, Horus, falcon-headed sky god and all-around celestial tough guy, lost his eye in a scuffle with his uncle Set. Later, the eye was magically restored, and voila! It became a symbol of healing, restoration, and divine order. Egyptians, being practical as well as mystical, used it like a spiritual firewall. Sailors painted it on the prow of ships to ward off sea monsters. Mothers sewed it into cloth to guard their babies. And priests placed it in the wrappings of mummies because even in death, you needed a good security system. Now here's where it gets strange. Some ancient texts mention 6 parts of the eye, each representing a different sense: sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell, and thought. Yes, thought. Apparently in Egypt, thinking was a sensory experience. Imagine your SATs being graded not by performance, but by how good they felt. Historians still argue whether this interpretation was metaphorical or literal. Did they believe the eye actually contained every sense? Or was it just poetic math? Even more curious, the parts of the eye correspond to fractions. One part is 1/2, another 1/4, then 1/8, 1/16, 1/32, and 1/64. Add them together and, surprise, you get 63 to 64. The missing 1 R64? Some say it represents the idea that perfection is always just slightly out of reach, which feels oddly comforting when you remember you forgot to take out the trash again. Now zoom out with me, hover above the Nile. See those towering pyramids in the moonlight? What if I told you the Eye of Horus wasn't just painted and carved? It was embedded in the architecture. Some researchers believe that entire pyramid layouts may have been modeled around the proportions of this divine eye. That's right, ancient Egypt may have been one big eye exam from the gods, or maybe they just like symmetry. There's also a fringe theory, and you know how much I love those, that the Eye of Horus encodes a cross-section of the human brain. I'm not kidding. Look up a diagram of the thalamus and compare it to the eye. You might do a double take. The logic? If the Egyptians preserved brains and studied them, maybe they understood more about consciousness than we give them credit for. Or maybe someone in the 1990s got really carried away with Photoshop. But let's not lose ourselves in speculation. What's undeniable is how far this symbol traveled. Even today, versions of the eye pop up in tattoos, jewelry, and protective amulets. It's on pendants hanging from rearview mirrors. It's printed on yoga mats. The Eye of Horus is like the original "I see you" sticker, but celestial. One story goes that Egyptian sailors heading into uncertain waters would sleep with one hand resting on the carved eye at the front of their boat, like holding the hand of a god. And maybe that's what symbols really are. Anchors, little handholds in the dark. Tiny ways we reach back through time to grasp something solid, something that says, you're not alone. Of course, not every interpretation of the eye is warm and fuzzy. During the Greco-Roman period, its image got blended with other occult symbols. Some believed it could be used to curse as well as to bless. Others thought it was watching your sins like some cosmic surveillance system long before the NSA. Suddenly, that soothing bedtime boat turns into a very judgmental cruise. Still, it's fascinating how a symbol so old, older than paper, older than most alphabets, could persist with such force. The eye doesn't blink. It doesn't age. It just watches, not like a predator, but like a memory, a guardian. And maybe that's why the Eye of Horus still rests on so many hearts and doorways. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't shout. It simply reminds. a soft whisper in paint and stone. You're seen, you're protected, carry on. And carry on we shall, but slowly, gently, with one symbolic eye open as we drift deeper into the mystery of ancient marks left behind. Not just on monuments, but maybe, just maybe, beneath our skin. If the Eye of Horus was watching, then in Mesopotamia, the gods were listening, closely. Let's slide east now, into the cradle of civilization, where clay tablets whispered secrets in cuneiform and ziggurats pierced the clouds. Beneath all this grandeur sat a humble symbol, the cuneiform star, a small 8-pointed sign etched again and again. Quiet, sharp, deliberate. This wasn't just any star, it represented Ishtar, the goddess of love, war, and depending on the mood, vengeance. Think Aphrodite meets Xena warrior princess, with a sideline in celestial power. Ishtar wasn't the type to wait for an invitation. She broke down doors, declared desire as divine, and turned the night sky into her diary. Her symbol? That radiant star. Some historians trace its meaning back to Venus, the morning and evening star. When Venus appeared in the sky, people believed Ishtar was watching. And if she was watching, oh, you better believe something dramatic was about to go down. Love or blood. Sometimes both. The star shows up on boundary stones, amulets, royal seals, basically ancient Mesopotamian merchandise. One Akkadian king even carved it into a temple wall with the inscription, "May Ishtar light the path of my enemies, so they trip and fall face first into a ditch." Okay, I paraphrased, but only slightly. Here's a fringe theory to tuck under your pillow. Some scholars believe the Star of Ishtar eventually morphed into the Star of Bethlehem centuries later. A stretch? Sure, but history has a funny way of recycling its icons, like spiritual upcycling. What's sacred in one era becomes symbolic in another, just in a different font. Let's pause on that. Fonts. Writing. Mesopotamians believed that words weren't just marks, they were living. To write a symbol was to invoke its spirit. The act of inscribing Ishtar's star wasn't just artistic, it was an invitation, a request, sometimes a warning. One Babylonian tablet describes a ritual where a priestess would draw the star in ash outside a lover's door, not for charm, for challenge. If the man didn't reciprocate, well, let's just say Venus wasn't always merciful. Historians still argue whether Ishtar's dual nature, goddess of both love and war, was unique or just incredibly honest. Either way, her symbol burned bright in both heavens and hearts. Now let me gently shake you with something a little weirder. A few rare tablets describe dreams in which people spoke directly with the star. Not a goddess, the star itself. One scribe claimed he woke with ash in his mouth and a word carved into his arm. Desire, it read. His wife was not impressed. Moving into Assyria, the symbol expanded, sometimes layered with wings or surrounded by rays like a tiny sun. It grew and adapted. Some kings wore it on helmets into battle. Others slept beneath it, carved into the wooden beams above their beds. Protection, yes, but also presence. The idea that the divine doesn't live in some far-off heaven. It flickers, close enough to touch, etched into the corner of your ceiling, tucked into your skin like a secret. And this star didn't stay behind in the dust of history. In modern times, its 8-pointed form has reappeared in everything from jewelry to tattoos to municipal logos. Even the Iraqi flag once bore a version of it. Funny how a love goddess from 4,000 years ago can still get billing on a modern emblem. Ishtar, eternal brand ambassador. But let's go deeper. Imagine a temple ceremony, incense thick in the air, drums echoing off stone, dancers in swirling linen invoking the star's power. Not to demand anything, but just to remember, to feel that pulse that once connected earth to sky, bone to flame, ink to desire. And maybe that's what symbols do best. They don't explain, they don't convince, they evoke. You don't have to understand a star to stand beneath it and feel something ancient stir. So if you find yourself tracing shapes in frost on a window, or doodling a star in the margins of a notebook, maybe that's not just boredom, Maybe it's muscle memory, from a soul that once danced in the ziggurat shadows, singing to a goddess who carried both kiss and blade. Now take another breath, deeper this time. We're only just beginning to see the night sky of symbols come alive. And the next constellation waiting? It's carved in jade, guarded by dragons, and hidden behind the folds of 1,000 silk scrolls. Step lightly now. We're entering a world of whispers and wind chimes, of incense curling through crimson halls. Welcome to ancient China, where symbols weren't just sacred, they were structural, like the skeleton beneath a civilization's skin. Here, everything meant something, and nothing was ever just decorative. Let's begin with one of the most iconic, the yin-yang. You've seen it. Black swirl, white swirl, a dot of each inside the other, like two koi fish chasing tails in eternal balance. But here's what most people miss. It isn't about opposites fighting, it's about opposites dancing. In Taoist cosmology, yin is the soft, dark, receptive force, cool water, moonlight, the hush of night. Yang is the bright, assertive push, sunlight, fire, motion. Neither is superior. Neither can exist without the other. It's not good versus evil. It's tea and cup, rain and roof, exhale and inhale. Legend has it the symbol came to a sage during a trance beneath a mulberry tree. He looked up at the sky, then down into a pond, and saw the pattern mirrored in both. The universe was spiraling in on itself, folding, breathing. He drew two interlocked swirls in the dirt with a stick and said, "This is everything." Historians still debate whether that's literal or poetic. Either way, the symbol caught on. Quickly, you'll find it carved into ancient bronze mirrors, woven into silk, etched into warrior armor. One general famously had it inscribed inside his shield, so that even when defending, he remembered to remain flexible. But if yin-yang is the stage, the bagua are the props. These 8 trigrams, sets of broken and unbroken lines, represent natural forces: heaven, lake, fire, thunder, wind, water, mountain, earth. Arranged in a circle, they map not just geography, but human experience. The bagua isn't just ancient geometry, it's spiritual architecture. Now brace for a tiny shocker. The early Chinese believed these patterns weren't invented. They were discovered, burned into turtle shells during divination rituals. The shells cracked, and out came cosmic code, as if the universe had been whispering in lines and fractures long before humans had ears to listen. One emperor reportedly slept surrounded by bagua mirrors, arranged to deflect negative ki and enhance dream messages. Another insisted his war tent be embroidered with each trigram so his enemies would see their fate before they felt it. And then there's the dragon, but not the fire-breathing beast of the West. The Chinese dragon is a cloud dweller, a bringer of rain, wisdom, and transformation. It coils like the yang, disappears like the yin, and is often shown clutching a pearl, another symbol, representing cosmic truth or the soul itself. One curious fringe tale: a scroll from the Han Dynasty claims dragons aren't mythical. They're just too evolved to be seen by unenlightened eyes. They live between the blinks, the text says, between thunder and silence. That brings us to the Tao, or the Way. A concept more than a symbol, but often expressed through calligraphy so precise it becomes spiritual art. The word itself, Tao, combines walk and head, suggesting a path you follow with your whole being. One philosopher joked, "The Tao that can be explained is not the true Tao, but I'll try anyway because this is due Tuesday." Temples would hang giant scrolls with the Tao character, not just for worship, but as reminders. Don't chase, align. Like water flows around a rock, so too should we flow around life's chaos. Here's something to swirl around your sleepy head. During the Tang Dynasty, poets believed that writing the Tao character beautifully could shift your destiny, not just symbolizing peace, but summoning it. They'd practice for hours, ink trembling, breath slow, brush moving like a whisper. Now let's peek into homes of ordinary folks. Above many doorways, you'd find the Fu character, meaning fortune or blessings. But sometimes it's hung upside down. Why? Because the word for upside down, Dao, sounds like arrive, Tao. So by flipping the symbol, they're saying luck has arrived. Cheeky, right? Even today, during Lunar New Year, people slap red paper foo all over walls, hoping fortune will stick like good wallpaper. Symbols weren't just static, they were interactive. Rituals made them breathe. Placement gave them direction. A dragon painted on the ceiling meant something different than one on the floor. A yin-yang on a sword meant balance in battle. On a baby's crib, balance in growth. And here's the softest little detail. In tea ceremonies, the steam rising from the cup was seen as the unseen character, the breath of the way, never drawn but always present. So next time you see the yin-yang slapped on a bumper sticker or a dragon tattoo coiled on someone's arm, remember, those aren't just cool designs. They're whispers, echoes, codes etched by people who believe the universe spoke in shape, in ink, in symmetry. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you're holding a bronze mirror, thousands of years old, with the bagua carved around its edge. As you tilt it, your face reflects back, swirled in the geometry of wind and thunder. You are not outside the system, you are part of the symbol. Now take a breath as we shift south, to a land of volcanoes, maze, and pyramids aligned with the stars, where jaguars walked with kings and the symbols. They bit back. Step carefully now. We're walking into the jungle, the kind where the trees hum with time and the stones whisper stories older than ink. Welcome to Mesoamerica, the land of the Maya and the Aztecs, where symbols weren't just sacred, they were alive. They governed blood, breath, harvests, and stars. Miss one, and your city might fall. Honor one, and your heart might just beat longer. Let's begin with the Hunab Ku, sometimes called the Mayan yin-yang, though that's like comparing a candle to a galaxy. This symbol looks like a spiraled eye, or a rotating black and white galaxy. And just like yin-yang, it represents duality, day and night, life and death. But it's also cosmic. The Mayans believed it was the source of all movement and measure, the pulse of the universe. Modern scholars still argue whether the Hunab Ku was widely used by the Maya or popularized later through New Age interpretations. But here's a curious twist. The pattern appears not just in art, but in geometry, reflected in how Mayan temples were built to align with celestial events. When the equinox sun hits a temple stair just right and a shadow serpent slithers down, that's not architecture. That's symbolic storytelling in stone. Now zoom into the Aztec calendar stone, a 24-ton nightmare for any moving crew. In the center, Tonatiuh, the sun god, tongue out, ready to devour. Around him, glyphs representing previous worlds because the Aztecs didn't believe in just one creation. They believed in 5, and we're in the 5th. Each age ended with apocalypse. Jaguars, hurricanes, fire. Not a great Yelp rating. One fringe interpretation. Some say the calendar predicts not time, but consciousness cycles, each sun representing a stage of human awareness. The 6th sun, they say, will be about inner vision, a return to heart over mind. But let's not get too dreamy, because the symbols weren't all peace and poetry. Take the Aeacatl mask, the wind god, a duck-billed face with swirling lines. Harmless? Not quite. Aeacatl could bring rains or rip away your crops. Farmers carved his symbol into stone and whispered prayers while scattering maize seeds. Wind wasn't just weather, it was mood. Now, ready for a chill. Some temples were deliberately constructed to echo the chirp of the sacred Quetzal bird. One clap, and the stairwell sings back. Acoustics as devotion, sound as symbol. Historians still debate if it was intentional engineering or happy accident, but either way, it leaves your skin buzzing. Then there's the jaguar, king of the underworld, not a mascot, a portal. For the Maya, jaguars weren't just animals. They were thresholds between the world of the living and the dead. Shamans would wear jaguar pelts during rituals, not just to look fierce, but to become the bridge. And let's talk blood. Yes, I promised PG-13, so don't worry, we'll keep this symbolic. But for the Aztecs, blood wasn't just life, It was currency. The glyph for blood? A flowing drop shaped like a leaf, usually drawn near the heart symbol. Why? Because they believed the gods gave blood to make the world, and needed it back to keep it spinning. You've heard of cosmic debt? This was literal. Still with me? Good. Let's peek at something sweeter. The sacred cacao pod. Yep, chocolate was sacred. The pod symbol appears in murals, vessels, and carvings, often surrounded by flowers and hummingbirds. Cacao wasn't dessert, it was the drink of the gods. Warriors would sip it before battle. Newlyweds shared it at weddings. One ruler was even buried with dozens of cacao jars because, apparently, the afterlife needed hot chocolate. Now try this image. A ceremonial knife, obsidian blade, hilt carved into a stylized heart, resting on a cloth embroidered with suns, jaguars, and stars. Symbols stacked upon symbols. A cosmos in miniature. And here's a real mindbender. The Mayan glyph for mirror was often associated with divine vision. Why? Because to look into a polished obsidian mirror was to see not yourself, but the spirits behind you. One tale says a seer looked into his mirror, saw a glowing figure, and whispered, "Oh, you again?" No further explanation given. You'll have to sleep on that one. But not all symbols were so mysterious. Some were practical, like mat glyphs, which represented governance and rulership. Why a mat? Because in Mesoamerica, power came not from thrones, but from councils. A woven mat meant consensus. And here's a quirky tidbit. In one codex, the mat is drawn underneath a god and a rabbit, suggesting divine wisdom and mischief. Of course, many of these symbols were encoded into codices, folded books made of bark paper. When the Spanish arrived, they burned most of them. Only 4 survive. 4. Think about that. An entire civilization's library reduced to a handful of pages. And yet, even those whisper, even those hum. So next time you see a stylized jaguar tattoo or a spiral on a woven blanket, remember, those are echoes of ancient grammar. Stories wrapped in shapes, myths folded into patterns. You're not just looking at art, you're looking at belief. And belief here in these jungled lands could move rivers, call rains, and tilt the very stars. Now, let's head east, across oceans and time, toward pharaohs and sacred eyes where symbols weren't just drawn, but buried with the soul. Ease your step now. We're treading sacred ground. Sand shifts beneath ancient sandals as we arrive in Egypt, where symbols weren't just ink on stone, they were portals, carved into tombs, painted on sarcophagi, etched into rings worn by priests and queens alike. These were keys to other worlds. To forget them was to get lost forever in the afterlife. Start with the most famous, the Ankh. That cross with a loop on top? It wasn't a fashion statement. It was life itself, eternal life. A divine exhale frozen in gold. Gods were often shown offering the Ankh to pharaohs, holding it to their lips, like a sip of cosmic oxygen. Some believed it symbolized the sun rising over the horizon. Others saw it as a union of male and female, life born from balance. Then there's the Eye of Horus, or Wedjot. You've seen it, stylized, mysterious, one brow arched like it knows something you don't. This symbol represented healing, protection, and wholeness. Legend says Horus lost his left eye in a fight with his uncle Set. The gods pieced it back together, making it even more powerful than before. Fun twist? Ancient Egyptians used parts of the eye's design as fractions. One section stood for 1-2, another for 1-4. It was like math meets myth. Historians still argue whether the Eye of Horus influenced later mystical systems, like the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe symbols don't die, they evolve. Ready for something darker? Meet the Djed pillar. It looks like a stack of discs or vertebrae. Sounds harmless. But it symbolized the spine of Osiris, god of the dead. When priests raised the Djed during rituals, they were reenacting Osiris's resurrection. Spine straightened, life restored. It wasn't just symbolic chiropractic, it was resurrection rehearsal. Now, picture the scarab beetle, Not exactly cuddly, right? But this little dung-rolling bug was the superstar of the Egyptian soul. Why? Because the sun god Khepri was believed to push the sun across the sky like a scarab with its ball of dung. And just like the beetle buried its eggs in the earth to hatch later, the Egyptians believed the soul could rise again. Scarabs were worn as amulets, carved into tomb walls and placed on hearts of the dead as cosmic passports. Fringe tidbit? Some Egyptologists believe the scarab symbol even encoded knowledge of celestial mechanics, like planetary motion. Or it might just be a really clever bug metaphor. Either way, it worked. Then there's the Ba and Kai, two symbols representing parts of the soul. The Ba was usually depicted as a bird with a human head, able to fly between realms. The Ka, on the other hand, was your life force, needing food and drink offerings even after death. Together they made you, but eternal. Misfeeding one, and well, afterlife might get awkward. Ever seen a crook and flail crossed over a pharaoh's chest? That's not just ancient accessorizing. The crook symbolized kingship as a shepherd, guiding the people. The flail? Authority and perhaps discipline. But here's a quirky twist. In some tombs, they're held not by kings, but by goddesses, suggesting divine sovereignty was not limited by gender. Let's spiral into the sacred geometry now. The Ouroboros, a serpent eating its own tail, might not be uniquely Egyptian, but its presence in their later magical papyri is striking. A symbol of eternity, cycles, and rebirth. It echoes the rhythm of the Nile, the seasons, and even the journey of Ra's solar boat across the underworld. Some mystics believe this symbol encodes ancient knowledge about time loops and consciousness. Others just say it looks cool. Both are valid. And now the big one, hieroglyphs themselves. Not just letters, living pictures. The Egyptians believed that writing a word gave it power. That's why names were carefully protected. To erase a name was to erase a soul, literally. Which is why you'll find the name Akhenaten scratched off temples. He changed the religion, and future pharaohs weren't having it. One of the most sacred symbols? The cartouche, an oval enclosing a royal name, like a bubble of divine security. To be named inside a cartouche was to be remembered across time. That's why when Howard Carter first peeked into Tutankhamun's tomb, he searched for the golden cartouches. Identity immortalized in a shape. Here's a sweet one, the lotus flower. A symbol of rebirth because it blooms fresh every morning from murky waters. Pharaohs wore it. God stood upon it. The lotus wasn't just botanical, it was existential hope. One myth says the sun itself rose from a blooming lotus at the dawn of time. Imagine waking up every morning on a floating flower. Beats hitting snooze. And if you ever get your hands on an ancient amulet depicting the Shen ring, a circle with a horizontal line beneath, it's not just jewelry. It symbolizes eternity and protection. Royalty wore it, gods offered it, and it still appears in talismans today. Of course, many of these symbols ended up buried in tombs, not for decoration, but navigation. The Book of the Dead? It wasn't a story, it was a cheat sheet. Spells, directions, passwords to help the soul pass through judgment and reach the field of reeds. Their version of paradise. One spell reads, "My heart is mine, and it shall not betray me." That's not poetry. That's courtroom testimony before cosmic scales. And yet, for all the stone and gold, all the temples and scrolls, maybe the most powerful symbol was always the simplest. A still body, a closed mouth, eyes lined with kohl, staring eternally toward the horizon. Not afraid, just ready. So as we step away from the Nile's edge, with sand still warm beneath our feet, let the symbols stay with you. Not just in your mind, but under your skin, whispers in your blood, gentle taps on your bones. They were never just pictures, they were instructions. The journey is over now, not in a dramatic way, more like the way fog lifts from a valley, quiet, inevitable. All the ancient breaths we borrowed tonight, all the forgotten fires, all the chants echoing from mountaintops and bone, they can rest now. You don't need to carry them. They were never heavy, just soft embers. Feel your breath again. It's slower now, like silk pulling through water. Maybe your shoulders have fallen just a little. Maybe your hands feel warm. That's the body remembering its own peace. You've wandered through deserts and temples, through dream states and sacred diagrams, through sighs whispered across generations. You've traced maps drawn not on paper, but under the skin. You've listened to secrets not spoken, but hummed, exhaled, shared in silence. And now there's nowhere else to go. Nothing more to uncover tonight. No more teachers to follow. The sages have gone to bed. The scrolls have closed. Even the stars seem to blink slower. Like they're drowsy too. So lie back, just as you are. Not seeking, not fixing. Imagine yourself as a pebble dropped in a still lake. No ripples, just sinking gently, gently, into the warmth of sleep. Your body is a vessel, your breath, the anchor, your dreams, the tide. Let them come. Let the world fade, like a mandala brushed away grain by grain. You are safe. You are enough. You are home. Good night, traveler. Sleep deeply. Sleep.